Welcome to the lecture on pregnancy and prenatal development. In this video lecture, we're going to look at some of the stages of pregnancy. I'll introduce you to the idea of prenatal development, some of the influences on that development, issues that can happen if the development is not going great, and then the state of kind of prenatal care in the United States or in California right now. So why my last lecture, I posed the question, why do we care about children before they're even conceived? We want to know now, why should we care about children before they're even born? Prenatal medical care and the experiences that mothers have while pregnant can affect the development of the fetus. So we know that there are certain things that you need to avoid, like smoking, drinking too much caffeine, things like that can affect the development of the child. And then the lack of or non-quality prenatal medical care can also affect the development of the child prenatally and also birth experiences as well. So we want to set children up for the best success by providing quality, culturally sensitive medical care and very safe environments where moms feel supported and cared for by their community and by the medical establishment around them. So we talked a little bit about some hereditary issues. So we talked about what happens with zygotes and they combine. We have three stages of prenatal development. We have the germinal, which is right here, which is just the first 0 to 2 weeks. You don't even know you're pregnant at this time. This is going from a tiny, tiny little cell up until about 2 weeks old. Then we have embryonic. Typically, this is when you're finding out that you're pregnant, you've missed a period or your menstruation, you take a pregnancy test, and this is typically when you'll find out that there is an embryo. And that's between 3 and 8 weeks pregnant. And then the fetal stage, which is primarily the biggest part of our prenatal development, and that's from about 8 to 9 weeks all the way up until birth. So we have 3 stages: germinal, embryonic, and fetal. In germinal ovulation, an egg, so in your fallopian tubes, an egg pops out, and then what happens is that it starts to grow, and as it leaves, if it becomes fertilized, that doesn't happen every month for every woman. If it is fertilized by sperm, then it becomes a blastocyst, then an embryo, and then that's where we'll also start to have the placenta, the amniotic sac, and the umbilical cord grow as well. From there, it could get implanted in our uterine wall, and that would mean that there's the possibility of a pregnancy, or if it's not implanted, then it would just lead to menstruation as well. So of fertilized eggs, only 10 to 15% of them actually implant and lead to a pregnancy. And then after implantation, only 75 of those pregnancies are carried past 20 weeks. So there's a lot of miscarriages and unfortunately stillbirths after the 20 weeks as well. So pregnancy is not always a sure thing because only a very small amount of those fertilized eggs actually implant. And then about a quarter of those are miscarried as well. So we have a fertilized egg, which goes to 2 cells. So, I mean, consider how tiny, tiny, tiny a cell is. I mean, it's smaller than the tip of our pen. A blastocyst has more cells, but the germinal stage is so microscopic. And the embryonic stage, once again, this is so small as well, too. This looks really big, but it's only 38 millimeters. So we're talking super, super small. This is so small that between, and this is at 8 or 9 weeks as we're kind of getting out of our embryo to fetus stage, but this is very, very, very small. You're not showing at this age. You might be feeling some changes, some nausea, things like that as your body is preparing for a pregnancy, but this is a very small, very tiny, very little celled organism. But it also has the beginnings of our umbilical cord, a hernia, typically where the umbilical cord is, and then we don't have a neck. Fingers and toes have not even emerged either as well. Some things that are happening are the eyes are starting to form. There are kind of leg and arm buds. If you've ever seen an ultrasound of a baby, they kind of look, I always called my kids when I was pregnant, we called them gummy bears because they just had little buds and they were moving around and they just had little buds. And then the heart is also starting to pump blood. We typically won't hear a heartbeat until 6 to 7, possibly even 8 weeks as well. But this is what it looks like. We've got the embryo, which is so small. And then from 12 weeks to 40 weeks, that's typically what we're talking about when we're talking about pregnancy. But you can see how much the cells reproduce, divide up until about 37 weeks when the pregnancy becomes full term. And then typically you deliver between 38 and 42 weeks pregnancy. This is when bones start forming. We add complexity to the systems, organs, and eyelashes. They start to have reproductive organs about 2 to 3 months. And then we also have urine as well, and their hearing develops as well. So this is what it looks like as well. So we've showed you what the baby looks like, but this is what it looks like inside of a woman. So we've got a tiny little poppy seed from the very beginning all the way to as small as a grape at 8 weeks. Then a lemon, avocado, coconut, an orange, lettuce, turnip, a papaya, and then a pumpkin as well. So that's kind of, and if you've ever seen pregnancy announcements online, a lot of times people will be holding a fruit next to them to illustrate how big the baby is. For me, I had twins, so I had 2 pumpkins. I had 2 placentas. I had all the amniotic fluid, and I delivered at 38 weeks. So I basically gave birth to 2 papayas. So this is the fetal behavior. My picture is not showing up, but babies kick, breathe, they suck their thumb, they turn, they squint, they swallow, and they hiccup as well. And if you put your hand on a pregnant belly, always ask first. It's pretty rude to just go up and grab people at the grocery store. That happened to me a lot when I was pregnant. It's not my favorite, but you can feel all of the squinting. I'm sorry, you can feel the kicking and the hiccuping as well, which is kind of a trip. All right, now there's a couple of types of growth that babies prenatally and afterwards engage in. And then one of them is proximal, and that's from the center out. So if you've ever seen a toddler, they'll get like a really big tummy, like a gut, and it's overhanging, but they've got like pretty slim legs and arms, and they've got this big old tummy. What that means is that they're engaging in proximal development. So that's from the center of the body out. And then if you see a toddler with a huge tummy, all of a sudden they're most likely going to hit cephalocaudal growth, which is head to tail. And then they'll be super tall and they'll have grown out all of their pants. They need a new diaper size. So we go from the center out, they get that big belly, and then all of a sudden they shoot up and they're really tall. So I talked about environment during our prenatal periods. There are a couple of things that we want to do. One of them, we want to limit caffeine to probably 1 to 3 cups. So you want about no more than 350 to 400 milligrams of caffeine daily. So this would be like maybe a frappuccino or a mocha frappuccino or whatever you typically drink. Kind of limit it to that. Caffeine is not bad for mom and the fetus. If it continues and it be like, I know people who drink like 7 cups of coffee over an entire day. That's not so great. There has been a link to miscarriage. And so we want to reduce safely with a doctor if you're drinking 10 to 12 cups a day. But our cup of 2 in the morning or a cup in the afternoon is not a problem for pregnancy. We do want to limit completely and stop any drugs, alcohol, or smoking with marijuana and tobacco, which I will talk about. Alcohol and drugs are very, very bad for brain development and can lead to lower IQs. And smoking marijuana and tobacco, we've seen some changes in IQ, and we're also looking at very low birth weight babies as well. It's really important that you manage pre-existing conditions like diabetes as well. So if you have diabetes 1 or diabetes 2, it's really important that you work with your doctor in order to manage those pre-existing conditions. For me, it's asthma. I always need to make sure that I have a good inhaler and that I have some management in place in my pregnancies because my asthma does change a little bit as well, and it's something my doctor needs to support me with. It's really, really important as well that some people, that pregnant people, also do not have infections as well. So toxoplasmosis, that's something you can get from cats. So we typically tell pregnant women, if you've got a cat, now's the time to stop cleaning out the cat litter box because it can be from cat feces. So typically a neighbor, a friend, a partner wouldn't take over that chore from you. Measles is a huge, huge issue when you're pregnant as well. You shouldn't come in contact or be infected in pregnancy. It can lead to fetal death. The baby can die from measles while pregnant. Stress can also affect the development of the child. We've seen some social and emotional delays in the child, and then also cleft palates, kind of a crack above your lip, in very severe stress. And I'm not talking a bad day, a fight with a loved one, stress over money. I'm talking like severe constant stress, like if you were in a hurricane and you had to flee from your house and you were evacuated, or you're a refugee, things like that. That's severe stress that we can see. We do want you to manage your stress and relax and take care of yourself and engage in self-care and at all possible try to avoid really severe stressors like that as well. All right, so this is about smoking in pregnancy. So we shouldn't smoke tobacco when we're pregnant. The biggest thing that we see is really low birth weight babies. So 4 or 5 pounds when we should be expecting a 7 or 8 pound baby. And those changes at birth, definitely we feel. The baby's smaller, they have a harder time sucking and nursing and feeding. They have a harder time gaining weight, and we want super fat babies. Babies need to be fat. That's how they grow and develop, and it also makes you smarter as well. All of that is really, really needed. The interesting thing though is marijuana you should not consume at all when pregnant as well. But from 2009 to 2016, the percentages of pregnant marijuana users almost doubled from 4% to 7%. And we're definitely seeing this in younger women. So 22% of adolescents' moms tested positive for pot, as did 19% of women between the ages of 18 and 24. While it is legal here in California, it's really important that if you find out that you're pregnant, that you seek help in limiting and then cutting out completely all your marijuana use. A lot of times people will encourage marijuana use for motion sickness or early morning sickness that you get typically in your first trimester. And while it might help with those symptoms, it's not good for the fetus. We also know that 6-year-olds who are born to moms who had smoked daily in their first trimester showed a decreased ability to understand concepts in listening and reading. So we know it's affecting your cognitive and your brain development as well. At age 10, children exposed to THC in utero were more impulsive than other children and less able to focus their attention as well. Children of mothers who used marijuana heavily in the first trimester also had lower scores in reading, math, and spelling as well. So we know that it's really, really important. And once again, it's legal here, and so no judgment with that. But if you find out that you're pregnant or a friend does, it's really important that we stop smoking marijuana, smoking tobacco, and drinking as well. And drinking is a huge, huge issue in pregnancy. We really, really, really have to stop drinking. A lot of times you'll hear, oh, a glass of wine or 2 is okay. It's really not. At this point, we know a lot about the development in the 9 months for a fetus. But what we don't know is what's happening at that very time and that very day. We know alcohol somehow affects development, but we don't know on that specific day how it would affect the child. Excessive consumption and binge drinking of alcohol leads to fetal alcohol syndrome. In fetal alcohol syndrome, their IQ is very, very low, very, very low. They have earlier life expectancies as well, and there's higher incidences of incarceration in jail as well. What we know is that the outer layer of your brain, the hippocampus, which does your memory, and your cerebellum, which is the back of your skull, your motor ability is all affected. My husband has a cousin who had fetal alcohol syndrome. He was adopted at birth, and he sadly passed away in his early 20s from a car accident. He was crossing the road and he didn't look both ways, and he was unfortunately struck and killed. That's very common with children with fetal alcohol and adults with fetal alcohol, because once again, they have a very low IQ sometimes. It's very hard for them to retain memory, for them to move their body appropriately. And the sad thing is that all of these brain development changes are 100% preventable if women stop drinking when they're pregnant. If you or a friend finds out that you are pregnant and want help, there is help all over. There are rehab programs, AA meetings. It's just a matter, and then your pediatrician or your obstetrician as well. It's a matter of reaching out and safely stopping the alcohol so that you can have the best, you can give your child the best available development so that they can grow healthy and strong. Once again, we do lots of prenatal care. So not only do we do identification and testing, but we like to take care of the mom, because you can have some scary things happen when you're pregnant. We have to make sure that the baby's growing well, and we do a lot of like kick counts. So in your last couple weeks of pregnancy, every day about the same time, you'll count how many kicks there are. Me with my twins, it was like totally pointless. They would say, oh, do it for 20 minutes. You need to feel 50 kicks. Yeah, with twins, I would feel like 100 kicks. But with my singleton, so my last pregnancy, I did this all the time. About 6 o'clock after I put my twins to bed, then I would lay down and I would just make sure that she was kicking. We do fetal monitoring as well. And then mom needs to have her blood pressure taken regularly, and we also test the urine as well to make sure that preeclampsia or anything that could hurt mom and the parent and the child are adequately taken care of. We also like to do interviews and assessments, so make sure if you're struggling financially or you're in a domestic violence situation or you're living in an unsafe neighborhood, that we can get social services support so that the environment around you is as safe and as healthy as possible, because that's the environment that the child is going to be raised in as well. So jumping back to the epigenetics, the environment and the genetics are both really important in how children learn, grow, and develop. Early and consistent prenatal development can identify those risks and complications, both to the parent to make sure they don't have gestational diabetes, their blood pressure doesn't go too high, and then I'll educate the family about how to get services, how to take care of babies, take CPR, and just monitor the fetus at home as well, so that everybody can deliver safely and healthy. We need to have excellent prenatal care that's supportive of women and also culturally relevant to who you are as well. Because in our prenatal period, all of those organs and body systems, all of those cells are reproducing, and some of these systems are things that we're going to then use for the rest of our life. So we need to make sure that parents have access to safe, healthy communities and environments, and then also access to quality prenatal care throughout the entire pregnancy to make sure that we're raising babies who are healthy and ready to develop, grow, and learn. Thanks so much. I'll see you guys online.